For as long as we have studied our own origins, one assumption has shaped everything we believe about the ancient world: that civilization began slowly, that humanity stumbled forward through thousands of years of trial and error before eventually discovering farming, architecture, astronomy, and religion. But hidden beneath the hills of southeastern Turkey lies a discovery that threatens to unravel that entire story. Göbekli Tepe, a name that now stands as the single greatest contradiction in human history, a site older than every known civilization, older than the pyramids, older than writing, older even than agriculture itself. 12,000 years ago, at a time when humans were supposedly little more than nomadic hunter-gatherers, someone carved enormous stone pillars, aligned them with the stars, arranged them in perfect circles, and filled their surfaces with animals, symbols, and warnings we still cannot fully decode. And the deeper we look, the more impossible it becomes to accept the official explanation of who built it. Because Göbekli Tepe should not exist, not at that age, not at that level of sophistication, not according to everything we were taught. So the question is simple: what if our history is wrong? Not a little wrong, not needs adjustment wrong, but completely, fundamentally, deliberately wrong. What if Göbekli Tepe is not the beginning of civilization, but the remains of something that came before? Something erased, something forgotten, something only the stones still remember. Archaeologists rarely admit it publicly, but many of the features found at the site make no sense within the accepted timeline of human development. These massive T-shaped pillars weigh up to 20 tons. Some are over 5 meters tall. They require advanced knowledge of quarrying, shaping, lifting, and positioning heavy stone, skills that supposedly did not exist for thousands of years after Göbekli Tepe was built. Yet there they stand, perfectly balanced, deliberately placed, covered with carvings as if trying to communicate something urgent across millennia. Even more unsettling is the fact that the entire site was buried, not naturally, intentionally. Layer after layer of clean, deliberate backfill encased the structures. Someone took enormous effort to hide this place, not destroy it, not abandon it, but bury it, almost as if sealing a message for future eyes. But why would a prehistoric society bury one of the greatest creations of the ancient world? The official theories claim ritual closure, symbolic ending, ceremonial burial. But these explanations feel hollow. They avoid the most disturbing possibility, that Göbekli Tepe was concealed to protect a memory or to hide a truth. Because the carvings on the pillars do not show scenes of daily life. They show predators, serpents, vultures holding spears, headless humans, and astronomical symbols arranged with mathematical precision. The site is not simply a temple. It's a message encoded in stone. And the message appears to point toward the sky. Researchers have noticed that several enclosures align with significant celestial events, such as solstices and equinoxes. But one alignment in particular has sparked intense debate: a configuration of symbols that match the night sky as it appeared around 10,900 BCE, a date known for a global catastrophe, a sudden climatic shock, and the beginning of the Younger Dryas, a period marked by rapid freezing, extinctions, and the collapse of unknown ancient cultures. If the stones are describing a cosmic event, a comet, an impact, or something else, then Göbekli Tepe becomes more than a temple. It becomes a warning from a generation that lived through a disaster powerful enough to reset the world. And what happens after a reset? Stories become myths. Facts become legends. Knowledge becomes sacred. Civilizations become forgotten. Almost every ancient culture speaks of a great flood, a great fire, or a sky-borne catastrophe that wiped out a previous world. Sumerians, Egyptians, Greeks, Hindus, Native Americans, cultures separated by oceans and continents, yet telling the same story. Most historians call these myths, but the stones at Göbekli Tepe suggest otherwise. There is another detail, rarely mentioned outside academic circles. Some of the stones used at the site appear to have been carved before the structure was assembled, meaning they were older than Göbekli Tepe itself, preserved from somewhere else, from some earlier time. If that is true, then Göbekli Tepe is not simply a construction, it is a reconstruction, a memory palace built from the ruins of an older civilization, a library of stone collecting the last surviving knowledge from a world devastated by a cosmic event. But even this idea leads to a more unsettling question. If Göbekli Tepe preserves knowledge from a lost world, then who were the people who carved the originals? Who carried this knowledge across time? Who taught hunter-gatherers to shape, lift, and align massive stones with astronomical precision? Were these survivors, refugees, civilizers, or something else entirely? Some researchers believe that Göbekli Tepe marks the work of a forgotten culture, far older, far more advanced, and far more widespread than we are comfortable admitting. A culture whose remnants exist not only in stone, but in myth, legend, and inexplicable similarities found in ancient sites across the world. Yet instead of exploring that possibility, mainstream academia avoids it. It challenges too many assumptions. It threatens too many careers. It forces us to rewrite everything we know. So a more convenient story is told instead, that primitive hunter-gatherers somehow built the world's first megalithic temple with no prior experimentation, no earlier attempts, and no transitional stages. A miracle of sudden genius rising out of nowhere. But the stones say otherwise. The burial says otherwise. The alignment with ancient sky events says otherwise. And the myths of every ancient civilization say otherwise. Göbekli Tepe is not an anomaly. It is a piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that suggests humanity's true story is far older, far more complicated, and far more intentionally hidden than we ever imagined. And if this is just the first piece, then the question becomes, what else lies beneath the sand, waiting to rewrite our past?
For generations, we were taught that the earliest humans gazed at the stars with wonder, not with understanding. That they feared the sky, worshipped it blindly, and lacked the scientific knowledge to interpret its movements. But Göbekli Tepe refuses to fit that narrative. Every stone, every symbol, every alignment points toward one unsettling truth. They were watching the sky, and they knew exactly what they were looking at. The pillars at Göbekli Tepe are not placed randomly. They form deliberate enclosures, circles within circles, each oriented in ways that defy coincidence. When researchers began analyzing these orientations, they noticed patterns. Lines pointing towards solstices, rising star positions, and specific constellations meaningful only to those who possessed deep, structured astronomical knowledge. But the most controversial discovery came when a group of independent researchers matched carvings on one of the pillars, Pillar 43, often called the vulture stone, to the exact configuration of stars in the sky around 10,900 BCE. This date coincides with the onset of a sudden global catastrophe, the Younger Dryas, marked by violent temperature drops and mass extinctions. If the carving truly represents the sky at that time, then Göbekli Tepe is not just a temple. It is a record a scientific record from a prehistoric society. And this leads to a question far more disturbing than the site's age. How could hunter-gatherers track the stars with this level of precision? Astronomy requires patterns, regular observations, and a stable society capable of long-term knowledge preservation. Nomads scattered across the landscape, chasing seasonal game, do not build star maps carved into stone. They do not create cosmic calendars. They do not align megaliths with solstices and equinoxes. Yet the people of Göbekli Tepe did. Either they were far more advanced than the textbooks claim, or they inherited knowledge from an older world. A world that understood the sky intimately. A world that watched the heavens not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. A world that saw something coming. Across many ancient myths, we find references to the sky falling, to fire from above, to serpents of light tearing through the heavens. These stories have been dismissed as poetic metaphors or primitive interpretations of natural events. But the symbols carved at Göbekli Tepe suggest something different. What if these myths describe real events witnessed by ancient humans? What if the sky did fall, quite literally? The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes that fragments of a comet struck the Earth, triggering massive fires, atmospheric disturbances, and sudden climate collapse. While the theory remains controversial, Göbekli Tepe's carvings seem to echo that very scenario. If true, then the site serves as a memorial, a cosmic warning carved by survivors. But why would they encode this warning into stone? Why pass it on to future generations? Why align their structures to the sky as if expecting the event to repeat? To answer this, we must look beyond Göbekli Tepe and examine its similarities to other ancient sites around the world. At Nabta Playa in Egypt, a circular stone alignment points to the rising of Orion and Sirius thousands of years before the pyramids. At Chichen Itza, Maya temples track equinox shadows with surgical precision. In Peru, the Intihuatana stone is crafted as a solar marker so accurate that its shadow vanishes on specific astronomical dates. Separated by continents and millennia, these cultures share the same obsession, the movement of the sky. Is it possible they all inherited fragments of the same ancient knowledge, pieces of a broken global system once united by a common purpose? Traditional archaeology insists these similarities are coincidences, but coincidence becomes harder to accept when the same patterns repeat across civilizations that supposedly never made contact with one another. What if Göbekli Tepe is the oldest surviving node of that forgotten network? The original observatory built by a culture that witnessed a cosmic catastrophe and vowed to ensure it would never be forgotten. If we consider this possibility, the carvings take on a new meaning. The animals are not animals. The symbols are not symbols. The pillars are not pillars. They are language, a code, a map. A map written for a future humanity that might face the same dangers. But here lies the greatest irony. For thousands of years, the message lay buried, hidden beneath tons of soil. Protected from erosion, protected from destruction, protected from us. It seems almost intentional, as if the builders wanted the site to be found only when humanity had reached a level where it could finally understand the message. A message that we are only now beginning to decode. Some researchers believe the burial of Göbekli Tepe marked the moment ancient survivors realized their world was truly lost. The climate was unstable, food resources unpredictable, knowledge slipping away. So they buried what they could not continue. They sealed the wisdom of their ancestors beneath the earth, knowing that someday, somewhere, someone would uncover it. And now, 12,000 years later, we stand at that threshold, unearthing stones carved by hands that survived the end of a world, hands that tried to warn us. So what exactly were they warning us about? An approaching cycle? A returning comet? A repeating celestial event? Or something deeper, something not yet understood? These questions will shape the next chapters of our exploration. Because if Göbekli Tepe is indeed a celestial map, then the truth it points to could change everything we believe about our past and everything we assume about our future.
For years, Göbekli Tepe has been described as the work of simple nomads, bands of wandering hunter-gatherers who somehow decided, without agriculture, without writing, without metals, to construct the most sophisticated ritual complex of the ancient world. But what if that entire explanation is nothing more than a story, designed to keep us comfortable? A myth meant to hide a truth far older and far more dangerous. Because buried beneath the official narrative is a question no scholar wants to confront. How did a civilization with no known technology suddenly build something that requires advanced engineering, astronomy, and symbolic language? Humanity did not climb a slow ladder of progress to reach Göbekli Tepe. Instead, around 10,000 BC, knowledge appears suddenly, fully formed, precise, almost surgical, as if someone or something delivered it. This is where the mystery deepens. The builders of Göbekli Tepe remain anonymous. No graves, no tools, no settlements. Nothing to show who they were or where they lived. The site is too advanced for its era, yet the fingerprints of its creators vanish the moment we try to follow them. Some researchers call them the hidden architects. And the deeper we look, the more it seems these architects were not an emerging culture, but a remnant of an older world, a world erased from history. Consider the precision of the pillars. Each T-shaped monolith weighs between 10 and 20 tons, carved with smooth edges and bas-relief animals so detailed they rival modern sculptors. But hunter-gatherers had no chisels, no metal tools, no beasts of burden, no architectural tradition. Yet the architects of Göbekli Tepe shaped limestone as if it were clay. Across enclosure D, the pillars are arranged in an exact circular geometry. Their orientations align with astronomical coordinates, tracking constellations and precession cycles. These are not the works of an emerging Stone Age culture. They are the fingerprints of people who understood the movement of the heavens, the mathematics of cycles, the geometry of time. And then there is the most unsettling fact of all. Göbekli Tepe appears to be the starting point, not the end point. A fully formed system. An architecture with no evolution, a language with no precursor. Civilization begins here, not in Mesopotamia thousands of years later. Why? Some independent scholars believe that the hidden architects were survivors of a cataclysmic event, the end of the last ice age. They inherited knowledge from a forgotten world and safeguarded it in stone. Others suggest something more extreme, that these architects were not merely survivors, but emissaries, the custodians of a transmission, messengers carrying forbidden knowledge from an unknown source. When the ice melted and global temperatures surged around 10,900 BC, ancient myths speak of the sky burning, oceans rising, and cities swallowed by the sea. Nearly every early culture, from Sumer to Egypt to the Maya, speaks of a lost age, a destroyed world, and beings who emerged afterward to teach humans how to rebuild. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki. The Egyptians called them the followers of Horus. The Greeks called them the Titans. Native Americans speak of The Star People. Different names, same story. In every myth, knowledge comes suddenly from an outside source, and in every myth, that source is described as non-human or not entirely human. What Göbekli Tepe suggests is that these myths may not be stories after all, but memories. Memories carved into stone. Memories buried beneath 12,000 years of soil. Memories of a time when the sky was not silent. Because what stands out most about Göbekli Tepe is the deliberate secrecy. The entire complex, tons of stone, hundreds of pillars, dozens of enclosures, was buried intentionally, not by erosion, not by time, but by human hands. Someone wanted this place hidden. The official explanation claims it was a ritual act, closing a sacred site, but that theory collapses under closer scrutiny. Hunter-gatherers didn't bury monumental structures. They walked away from them. They left them to decay. But Göbekli Tepe wasn't abandoned. It was sealed. Buried like a time capsule. Hidden like a forbidden library. Some theorists propose that the hidden architects covered the site to protect it from an enemy, from a coming disaster, or from future civilizations deemed unworthy or unprepared for its knowledge. Others believe it was buried by a later group, people terrified of what they found there. Because many of the symbols at Göbekli Tepe are unlike anything else in human history. Human forms without faces, beings with animal heads, hands positioned in strange gestures, creatures that do not exist on Earth. And then there are the belt carvings, strange objects depicted on the torsos of certain pillars. These objects resemble tools, not primitive ones, but something more advanced, something that looks suspiciously like instrumentation. The hidden architects were not primitive. They were not ignorant. They were not alone. One theory, quietly discussed but rarely acknowledged publicly, suggests that Göbekli Tepe was a contact point, a place where knowledge was exchanged, a place where humans met with entities from beyond our world or beyond our era. Entities depicted as animals, not because they were beasts, but because their true appearance could not be shown or could not be understood. Across different pillars, the same figure appears: long arms, bent elbows, smooth body, no face, no eyes, no mouth, almost humanoid, but not. Some interpret these as shamans or spirits, others as stylized humans, but a growing number of researchers see something else: a being wearing a suit, a being with covered features, a being intentionally hiding its identity. If this is true, then Göbekli Tepe may be the oldest record of non-human contact on the planet. And if the site was buried to hide this truth, then everything we know about early civilization collapses. Göbekli Tepe becomes not the birthplace of religion, but the grave of forbidden history. The hidden architects vanish from the archaeological record after Göbekli Tepe was sealed. No gradual decline, no migration. They simply disappear. Unless they didn't. Some fringe researchers claim evidence of their influence at sites thousands of years younger: the layout of the Giza Plateau, the astronomical alignments at Stonehenge, the underground cities of Anatolia. It's as if a single guiding intelligence left scattered traces across the world, always hidden, always encoded, always just out of reach. And now, after 12,000 years, their earliest message, the one carved at Göbekli Tepe, has resurfaced. a message humanity was never meant to read, a message resurrected by accident, a message that whispers the same warning. We were here before you. We will return.
For decades, archaeologists focused on the stones of Göbekli Tepe, its pillars, carvings, and architecture. But the true secret of the site does not lie in the rock beneath our feet. It lies in the sky above it. And when researchers finally turned their gaze upward, they discovered something that shattered the foundation of ancient history. Göbekli Tepe is not only a temple, it is a star map, a celestial code carved into the earth. At first glance, the carvings appear chaotic: foxes, scorpions, vultures, snakes. But when astronomers analyzed their positions and compared them to the sky as it appeared around 10,000 BC, a terrifying pattern emerged. Each creature corresponds not to an earthly animal, but to a constellation. The scorpion is Scorpius. The vulture aligns with Sagittarius. The eagle resembles Aquila, the eagle. Even the abstract symbols match star clusters and asterisms. Göbekli Tepe is a mirror, a stone reflection of the heavens. But this was just the beginning. What came next is the reason many researchers remain silent, because the pillars do not only depict constellations, they track celestial events with impossible precision. The complex aligns with the rising of Sirius, the precession of equinoxes, and even long-term cycles that only advanced civilizations can calculate. For hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago, this is not only unlikely, it is mathematically impossible. Unless they were taught. Unless someone showed them. Some researchers believe the builders of Göbekli Tepe understood the Great Year, a 25,722-year cycle caused by the wobble of Earth's axis. It's a concept even classical civilizations like Greece only barely grasped. Yet Göbekli Tepe seems designed around it, marking shifts in zodiacal ages and the slow migration of the stars. If this is true, then the world's oldest temple is also the world's oldest observatory, a place where ancient astronomers recorded the rhythms of the sky with engineering that borders on supernatural. But why? What were they watching for? Some say Göbekli Tepe was a calendar used to track seasons, migrations, weather patterns. Others suggest it was for ritual or myth-making. But an emerging theory, quietly discussed among fringe researchers, paints a far stranger picture. Göbekli Tepe may have been a warning system. Across Pillar 43, often called the Vulture Stone, symbols appear that resemble a blast from the heavens, a projectile, a falling object, a cosmic impact. When decoded, the pillar appears to describe a real event, the Younger Dryas impact, a catastrophic meteor shower that ended the Ice Age and erased entire species from the Earth. In other words, Göbekli Tepe's builders were not only watching the sky, they were remembering what came from it. This raises a chilling possibility. The architects of Göbekli Tepe were not simply stargazers. They were survivors, people who had lived through the end of a world, people terrified that the sky would burn again. And so they carved the heavens into stone, not as worship, but as memory, an astral archive, a celestial record, a star-coded warning for future ages. But this revelation opens the door to even more dangerous questions. How did they know the exact position of stars during an epoch thousands of years before recorded history? How did they chart cycles that take tens of thousands of years to complete?
How did a society without settlements, without writing, without agriculture, leave behind the most advanced astronomical map ever found? The official answer is that it must be coincidence. The pillars just happen to resemble constellations. The alignments just happen to match astronomical events. The geometry is just accidental. But coincidence collapses under repetition. Across multiple enclosures, the same alignments appear, the same directional layouts, the same celestial motifs. Göbekli Tepe isn't a collection of random carvings. It's a system, a deliberate design, a coded message. But who encoded it? One theory suggests the knowledge predates Göbekli Tepe by thousands of years, that an earlier, unknown culture mastered the stars long before the site was built. Another proposes something even more explosive. Göbekli Tepe was built using non-human knowledge. Knowledge from a source that watched Earth from above, tracked celestial cycles, predicted cosmic catastrophes, and taught human Earth survivors how to survive. Not out of generosity, but out of necessity. Because if an advanced intelligence wanted humanity to rise quickly, to rebuild, repopulate, and advance, it would need a jump start. It would need to give us the stars. And if that intelligence left, or perished, or simply observed from the shadows, the star map at Göbekli Tepe might be the only trace of their involvement. A whisper from an ancient mentor, a signature hidden in the constellations. Skeptics dismiss this idea, claiming that early humans could have discovered these things alone, but no evidence supports that. Not a single transitional site exists, showing a gradual rise in astronomical knowledge. One moment, humans were tracking simple seasons. The next, they were mapping the galaxy. It is as if a switch was flipped, as if someone turned on the lights of human consciousness. Some believe the switch was Göbekli Tepe. Others believe Göbekli Tepe is merely the first surviving remnant of a forgotten age, a remnant that challenges everything we assume about human evolution. But perhaps the most unsettling possibility is this. Maybe Göbekli Tepe is not a message from the past, but a countdown to the future. A map of the sky, not as it was, but as it will be. A prediction, a warning, a date encoded in stone. Certain alignments at the site will recur, some in hundreds of years, others in thousands of years. If the vulture stone is indeed a record of cosmic impact, then future alignments could mark future catastrophes. Did the ancient builders fear a return of the fire from the sky? Did they bury Göbekli Tepe because the prophecy was too dangerous? Or did they intend it to be uncovered, exactly when it was? The timing of the discovery is eerie. Göbekli Tepe remained hidden for 12,000 years, until the modern era when humanity could finally decode its message. It waited for a world connected by satellites, global communication, and digital astronomy. Almost as if it knew we would someday understand. Almost as if we were meant to. Even now, new pillars continue to emerge, each revealing deeper layers of the star code. Each discovery pushes the origin of civilization further back, closer to a time when humans were not supposed to exist at all. Göbekli Tepe rewrites history not through speculation, but through stone. And the stones whisper a terrifying truth. You were not the first. You are not alone. And the sky remembers everything.
For years, archaeologists assumed Göbekli Tepe was built by simple hunter-gatherers, nomadic tribes armed with stone tools and primitive skills. But the deeper we dig,
the more this narrative unravels. Because the people who built Göbekli Tepe were anything but simple. They were precise engineers, they were master planners, they were astronomers, mathematicians, and stoneworkers on a level that should not have existed 12,000 years ago. And they did not appear slowly, gradually, or naturally. They appeared fully formed, with advanced knowledge, as if emerging from nowhere. This sudden leap, this unexplained explosion of intelligence, has left many researchers unsettled. Because evolution does not produce sudden brilliance. It does not take a species from crude stone flakes to megalithic architecture overnight. Unless something, or someone, intervened. Official explanations crumble when confronted with the facts. Göbekli Tepe required coordinated labor, engineering, food distribution, quarrying systems, architectural design, and astronomical planning. But these are the hallmarks of an advanced society, one that should come after agriculture, after settlements, after writing. Instead, Göbekli Tepe came first. Civilization arrived upside down, starting with its most complex form. This is why certain researchers, quietly and often anonymously, refer to the builders as the hidden architects, a group, culture, or intelligence that predate all known human societies. Some believe they were an isolated tribe that gained knowledge mysteriously. Others claim they were survivors of a lost civilization destroyed at the end of the Ice Age. And a few whisper a theory far more dangerous. The hidden architects were not entirely human. This theory is dismissed publicly, yet discussed privately among scholars who have seen Göbekli Tepe firsthand. They point to details ignored by the mainstream. The height of the T-pillars, many rising to 6 meters, the weight of the stones, up to 20 tons, the precision of the cuts, smooth, consistent, mathematically aligned, the standardized shapes carved identically across different enclosures, the symmetrical spacing, the geometric ratios carved into stone. Nothing about Göbekli Tepe feels like experimentation or trial and error. It feels standardized, organized, planned by a mind or minds with a template. But if these hidden architects existed, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who taught them? Some propose the existence of a mother civilization, a global culture wiped out by the Younger Dryas catastrophe, one with seafaring ability, mathematics, and astronomy. This idea connects Göbekli Tepe to underwater ruins near Yonaguni, mysterious structures in the Sahara, and megalithic alignments across the globe. Others believe knowledge came from a different source entirely, one that descended from the sky, interacted with early humans, and vanished just as quickly. But perhaps the most unsettling idea is not that someone taught the hidden architects, but that the hidden architects were the teachers. A small group of advanced individuals guiding humanity after the cataclysm, seeding knowledge across continents, helping rebuild what was lost. Ancient myths from around the world echo this possibility. In Sumer, they are the Apkallu, wise beings sent after the flood to restore civilization. In Egypt, they are the Shemsuhor, the followers of Horus, bearers of forgotten knowledge. In Mesoamerica, they are the Viracochas, pale, bearded teachers who appeared after a great disaster. Different cultures, different names, the same story. The hidden architects. But Göbekli Tepe might be the oldest physical evidence of their existence. It is not merely a temple, it is a monument to a transfer of knowledge, a point where human development suddenly accelerated, as if a switch had been flipped in our collective mind. This is why the site was buried intentionally. Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed by enemies, weather, or time. It was entombed, deliberately, carefully, and completely. Tons of soil were poured over it, the enclosures were sealed, the pillars hidden. But why would anyone bury a masterpiece? Some say it was protection, preserving sacred knowledge from war or disaster. Others argue it was ceremonial, closing a chapter in human history. But a darker theory suggests the burial was not an act of reverence, but an act of fear. If the site encoded dangerous astronomical warnings,
if it recorded the return of cosmic cycles, if it marked the influence of non-human intelligence, perhaps the builders believed the knowledge was too powerful, too dangerous, too enlightening. Perhaps they buried it to keep it from falling into the wrong hands, or from awakening something that was never meant to return. But it returned anyway, because we uncovered it. We dug up what ancient hands tried to hide. We exposed the star map, the symbols, the memory of the cataclysm. We revived the legacy of the hidden architects. And there is a reason the timing feels uncanny. Göbekli Tepe slept beneath the earth for 12 millennia, revealed only when humanity became capable of global communication, satellite mapping, and advanced astronomy. Almost as if the site was waiting for us. Almost as if the message was meant to be opened now. But the deeper mystery is this. There are still dozens of enclosures untouched, hundreds of pillars buried, thousands of symbols unseen. What will they reveal? What secrets remain hidden beneath the soil? What story have we uncovered only the surface of? Some archaeologists fear that within the unopened chambers might lie conclusive evidence, artifacts, carvings, or even biological traces that could rewrite everything we believe about human history. Others fear that revealing the full truth might shatter the world in ways we are not prepared for. Because if the hidden architects were real, if they possessed knowledge beyond their time, if they rebuilt humanity after a cosmic disaster, then what else did they know? What warnings did they leave behind? And why did they vanish? The silence surrounding these questions is telling. Researchers who pursue these ideas are ignored, ridiculed, or quietly discredited. Funding disappears, research stalls, data becomes lost. A pattern emerges, a pattern suggesting someone, somewhere, does not want the truth to emerge. But truth has a way of rising from the ground, just like Göbekli Tepe. Because this forgotten temple is not simply a relic, it is a doorway leading to a deeper understanding of our kind, our origins, and our purpose. As the buried chambers wait for the day they will be unearthed, one thing becomes clear. The hidden architects are not just a myth, they are the missing chapter of human history, and their story is only beginning to unfold.
Long before the familiar gods of ancient civilizations, Zeus, Enki, Ra, Quetzalcoatl, there were older gods, forgotten gods, silent gods carved not in papyrus or parchment, but in stone. Göbekli Tepe may be the oldest surviving shrine to these beings, not mythic figures of imagination, but memories of real entities remembered by early humanity. Across multiple enclosures, the same pattern appears again and again. Towering T-shaped pillars, faceless, expressionless, but unmistakably humanoid. Arms carved along the sides, hands resting on the belly. Belts and loincloths etched with precision. No eyes, no mouth, no features. As if the beings they represent were never meant to be seen clearly. As if their identity was a secret. Archaeologists call them pillars, but ancient people may have called them gods. The world's first gods. And unlike later mythologies, these figures were not worshipped from afar. They stood among the people, right inside the circles, towering over the gatherings. Some researchers believe the T-pillars represent ancestors. Others believe they depict shamans in trance. But there is a far older, far stranger theory, one whispered in the early days of excavation. The pillars depict non-human visitors who once walked the earth. Tall, elongated beings with broad shoulders and narrow hips. Smooth surfaces where faces should be. A presence more symbolic than biological. The builders of Göbekli Tepe did not imagine these forms. They remembered them. In this theory, the facelessness is deliberate, a way of capturing unfamiliar beings whose appearance was unlike anything human. The arms and hands are human-like, yet exaggerated. The clothing resembles neither prehistoric garments nor animal skins, and the sheer size, sometimes over 16 feet tall, suggests these figures were meant to dwarf human participants. But what purpose did these godlike beings serve? If the hidden architects were influenced, guided, or instructed by non-human intelligence, then Göbekli Tepe could be the earliest monument honoring those encounters. Not gods, but teachers, or rulers, or something in between. Across the world, ancient cultures speak of beings who descended after a great catastrophe. In Sumer, the Apkallu, who brought civilization after the flood. In Egypt, the Shamsu-Hor, who ruled before the first kings. In the Andes, the Viracocha, who appeared after the darkness. Every mythology begins not with humans discovering knowledge, but with knowledge being given to humans. Göbekli Tepe may be the oldest fragment of this story. But then comes the most chilling detail. The central pillars in several enclosures face each other, almost like two entities communicating or confronting one another. Some researchers believe these twin figures represent duality, life and death, heaven and earth, chaos and order. But others claim they symbolize a meeting, a council, a negotiation between beings not of this world. The surrounding pillars could represent followers, witnesses, or even genetically distinct tribes shaped by these encounters. This begins to overlap with an unsettling possibility. The builders of Göbekli Tepe may not have been merely taught by these beings. They may have been altered by them. Geneticists studying ancient DNA have repeatedly found anomalies, strange haplogroups, unexplained markers, abrupt changes in brain development. These appear around the same time Göbekli Tepe was active, as if humanity itself was being upgraded, a software patch applied to our consciousness, a sudden leap in intelligence, a cognitive explosion. Mainstream scholars call this the Great Leap Forward, but they cannot explain why the leap happened or why it happened so fast. Göbekli Tepe, in this theory, is ground zero for the transformation. A place where early humans witnessed something so extraordinary, so overwhelming, so impossible, that it shaped their myths for thousands of years. But what if the pillars are not just representations of these beings? What if the beings were actually inside the structures, buried beneath them, worshipped as relics, preserved as dormant entities waiting to awaken? Some enclosures contain central pits or cavities carved into the bedrock. Archaeologists insist these were ritual areas, but their shape resembles sarcophagi, storage chambers, containment cells. Were the central pillars guardians of the sealed pits? Or were the pits the reason the pillars were built? Göbekli Tepe is older than writing, older than agriculture, older than any city, yet it feels deliberate, ceremonial, almost funerary, as if it was built to memorialize something, or someone. Some fear it may have been a tomb. Others think it was a machine. Some whisper it was a prison. Regardless of interpretation, one detail stands out. When Göbekli Tepe was buried, the T-pillars were covered as carefully as fragile artifacts, as if the builders feared what would happen if the pillars remained exposed, as if burying the site was not a choice, but a command. A global myth echoes this fear, that before the rise of humanity, beings once ruled the earth, and a great cleansing wiped them out. The flood myths of Sumer, Egypt, India, and Mesoamerica all speak of an older world, a forgotten age. Göbekli Tepe stands at the threshold of that forgotten era, and its pillars, simple yet powerful, may be the only surviving testimony. But if these godlike beings existed,
if they guided or shaped early humans, the greatest mystery remains. Why did they disappear? Were they destroyed by the Younger Dryas impact? Did they abandon Earth? Were they forced into hiding? Or did humanity, newly awakened, overthrow their teachers? The answers may lie in the next uncovered enclosure, one archaeologists have identified but not yet excavated. Some call it the Omega structure, believed to be the largest circle, still untouched, still sealed by ancient hands. If opened, it may reveal carvings unlike anything seen before. Symbols of origin, symbols of destruction, symbols of entities that shaped our world and then vanished. Or perhaps it will reveal nothing, just stone and dust, and our imaginations filling the silence. But the secrecy surrounding the unexcavated areas is strange. Funding is limited. Access is restricted. Satellite images are blurred. Ground-penetrating radar results are withheld. It is almost as if someone already knows what lies beneath and does not want it revealed. Göbekli Tepe is no longer just an archaeological site. It is a battlefield of narratives, a place where myth, science, and conspiracy collide. And the truth, whatever it may be, is buried, waiting for us, waiting for the moment humanity is ready to understand its own origins. Because Göbekli Tepe is not only the first temple, it is the first clue, the first chapter of a story erased from history. A story of gods who were not gods, of teachers who were not human, of a civilization older than time, of a catastrophe that reset the world. A story carved in stone, buried in fear, and uncovered exactly when humanity began to question everything. Göbekli Tepe challenges us with one haunting question. What if the first gods of humanity were real? And what if they're not gone, only sleeping beneath the earth, waiting to be found again?
For thousands of years, humanity has gazed upward, searching for meaning in the scattered lights of the night sky. We assume this longing is modern, born from philosophy or science. But Göbekli Tepe whispers a very different story, one that suggests we were taught to look upward, as if guidance came not from within, but from an older, hidden intelligence. In this chapter, we explore a question that has haunted archaeologists, astronomers, and mythologists alike. Who were the architects of Göbekli Tepe's forbidden knowledge? Because the truth hiding beneath these stones may not simply rewrite history, it may expose a chapter deliberately buried from the human mind. Some researchers believe the builders of Göbekli Tepe were ordinary hunter-gatherers who simply possessed extraordinary talent. But the deeper you investigate, the more that explanation falls apart. These people had no writing system, no metal tools, no agriculture, and supposedly no formal education, and yet they carved megaliths weighing up to 20 tons, aligned them to celestial events with mathematical precision, and encoded astronomical cycles that modern computers confirm as accurate. This is not merely impressive, it is impossible by the standards of mainstream archaeology. So how did they do it? Where did this sudden explosion of intelligence come from? And why does it vanish just as mysteriously as it appeared? One theory, dismissed publicly yet discussed quietly behind closed doors, is that the knowledge did not originate with the builders. It came from somewhere else. A transfer of wisdom so profound that ancient cultures later remembered it as encounters with gods, watchers, or sky beings who descended from above. If this sounds like mythology, consider this. Nearly every ancient civilization tells the same story. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, celestial beings who taught humans the secrets of heaven and earth. The Egyptians recorded Thoth, the bringer of divine knowledge. The Maya spoke of Kukulkan, a feathered serpent from the sky who taught astronomy and timekeeping. Even the Greeks wrote of Prometheus, the figure who gave humanity forbidden gifts. These are not isolated legends, they form a global pattern. And Göbekli Tepe, older than all of them, might be the origin point. But who would these teachers have been? Some believed they were simply a more advanced lost human civilization, perhaps the survivors of a cataclysm like the Younger Dryas impact, a world that collapsed, leaving behind fragments of its knowledge passed down by the last remnants of a forgotten people. Others claimed they were not human at all. In recent studies, researchers have analyzed the symbolic carvings on Göbekli Tepe's pillars, not as art, but as a form of proto-writing. Many symbols correspond to star patterns. The scorpion matches Scorpio. The vulture matches Cygnus. The fox resembles Lepus. But then there's the figure that appears again and again. A humanoid with elongated limbs, long fingers, and sometimes a curved or elongated head. Mainstream scholars label it stylized human design. But fringe researchers point out something different. The figure does not resemble the people of the region at the time. Its proportions are wrong. Its head shape is wrong. The artists who carved perfect animals somehow failed only when depicting people. Or were they depicting something else entirely? What if this figure represents the beings who taught them, beings not bound to human form? This theory becomes even more unsettling when you consider why Göbekli Tepe was buried. Archaeological evidence shows it was intentionally covered with tens of thousands of tons of soil, not eroded, not abandoned, buried, which raises a terrifying question. What were they trying to hide? Or worse, what were they trying to protect themselves from? Imagine a world after a devastating cataclysm, impacts, floods, and global fires. Humanity is traumatized, recovering, rebuilding. A group of survivors know secrets too powerful to be allowed into the wrong hands, so they encode the knowledge in symbolic form, hide it inside stone circles, and then bury the entire complex so only future generations, perhaps those with the intelligence to understand, could rediscover it. A time capsule for the distant future. But others argue the opposite, that Göbekli Tepe was buried to erase a dark chapter of history, a chapter where contact with non-human intelligence went too far, crossing a line humanity was not meant to cross. The truth might lie somewhere between the two extremes. Perhaps the architects were survivors of a lost civilization who themselves had inherited knowledge from an even older source. Knowledge of the stars, mathematics, geometry, and timekeeping so advanced that early humans shaped their entire worldview around it. Whatever the origin, the fingerprints of intelligence, ancient, deliberate, and overwhelming, are everywhere. They are in the perfect north-south alignments, in the encoded precessional cycles, in the predictive astronomy carved into stone, even in the strange humanoid figures that look less like humans and more like visitors. But the most haunting clue is this. Göbekli Tepe appears to be the first sacred site in human history, meaning humanity's very first temple was not dedicated to earth, water, or survival, but to the sky, to something above, something that watched, something that taught. And as we continue to unearth the site, new mysteries keep emerging. symbols we cannot decode, chambers that remain hidden underground, and pillars that point not to random stars, but to cosmic cycles far beyond what ancient hunter-gatherers should have understood. Göbekli Tepe is not just a prehistoric monument, it is a puzzle left behind by a forgotten intelligence, one that wanted future generations to ask the very questions you are asking now. Who built this place? Where did they come from? And what secret were they trying to leave behind? As we move forward, the next chapter explores the most controversial question yet. Did Göbekli Tepe encode a warning? One meant for us? For decades, archaeologists assumed Göbekli Tepe was simply a sanctuary, a place of ritual gatherings or spiritual ceremonies. But as more carvings are deciphered and patterns begin to emerge, a darker possibility takes shape, one that turns the entire site into something far more urgent. Because hidden among the animals, symbols, and celestial maps is what many believe to be a warning. A message carved by a civilization on the brink of catastrophe, meant not for themselves, but for us. Let's begin with what researchers call Pillar 43, also known as the Vulture Stone. At first glance, it appears to depict a series of animals, a vulture, a scorpion, a snake, and several abstract shapes. But when astronomers analyzed the positions and proportions of these figures, a stunning revelation emerged. The stone appears to be a star map. Not just any map, but a map of the night sky from approximately 10,950 BCE. The date is not random. It corresponds almost exactly to the Younger Dryas impact event, when massive comet fragments struck the Earth, causing global fires, super tsunamis, and the near extinction of human populations. The climate plummeted within months. Species vanished. Ice sheets melted in violent bursts. Entire land masses flooded. For Göbekli Tepe's builders, this wasn't ancient history. It was lived reality. And if the Vulture Stone truly encodes the sky at the moment of catastrophe, then the terrifying implication is this. Göbekli Tepe may have been built, at least in part, to record the disaster, to warn future generations of a cycle that would come again. This is where the mystery deepens, because the stone does not only depict constellations, there is also a symbol resembling a comet streaking downward. Early interpretations dismissed it as a simple abstract glyph, but in 2017, specialists in archaeoastroenology matched its position to an incoming comet from the Torrid Stream, an astronomical cluster associated with periodic, large-scale impacts throughout history. Meaning the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not only recording the past, they were predicting the future. They believed the disaster would return. But why would hunter-gatherers, people we label primitive, go to such extreme lengths to encode a cosmic warning in stone? Unless they had seen something so traumatic, so apocalyptic, that they feared humanity might someday forget. Imagine a world shattered overnight, forests burning from horizon to horizon, skies darkened by ash, oceans rising, survivors scattered, struggling to rebuild. Every night they would have looked upward, terrified the sky might fall again. This fear carved into stone became a message that survived 12,000 years longer than its authors. But the warning is not only astronomical. Across several enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, the same pattern repeats. Animals associated with constellations surrounding two central pillars. Those central pillars are always represented as towering T-shaped beings, not animals, not humans, something else, something larger. These figures appear almost guardian-like, protective, yet severe. Some researchers believe they represent cosmic entities, beings who stand between humanity and the destructive forces of the universe. Others suggest they depict the teachers or watchers remembered in ancient mythology, custodians of knowledge who could foresee celestial cycles. But an alternative interpretation is far more unsettling. The pillars might represent the catastrophe itself. Twin impacts, twin fragments, twin signatures of destruction. Two cosmic events that change the world. And as odd as this may sound, modern geological research supports the idea. Multiple impact craters dating to the same era point to a fragmented comet entering Earth's atmosphere, striking the northern hemisphere in pieces, triggering the epoch-changing Younger Dryas freeze. If Göbekli Tepe encodes this catastrophic event, then the symbolism of two central pillars surrounded by constellations is not random. It is a map of the cosmic event the builders witnessed and feared would happen again. But the most haunting detail comes not from the carvings themselves, but from the layout of the site as a whole. Göbekli Tepe is built in circles, stone rings, repeating patterns of enclosures aligned with the stars. The entire site mirrors a cosmic cycle, one older than agriculture, older than writing, older than any known civilization. Some see this circular design as a calendar, others as a ritual structure, but a growing number of researchers believe the circles represent something far more profound: cycles of destruction, patterns of cosmic impacts recorded across tens of thousands of years. Ancient myths repeatedly speak of world ages, eras that end not gradually, but violently. Floods, fires, falling stars, the end and rebirth of humanity. And while mainstream scholars dismiss these stories as metaphor, Göbekli Tepe suggests they might be memories, encoded and passed down through generations. If so, then Göbekli Tepe is not only a temple, it is a survival manual, a message from the ancient world warning that civilization rises and falls not by chance, but by cycles written into the heavens. And when we consider modern astronomy, its models, predictions, and analyses, the warning becomes even more chilling. Because the Torrid complex, the same meteor stream believed to have caused the Younger Dryas impacts, is still active today. Earth passes through it twice every year. Some of its fragments are massive, large enough to destroy continents. The builders of Göbekli Tepe would have known none of this in scientific terms, and yet, somehow, they knew enough to sound the alarm. What else did they know? What did they witness? What knowledge did they bury with the site, knowledge we are only now beginning to unravel? Göbekli Tepe is more than an archaeological site. It is a prophecy, a warning encoded by a people who stared into the face of cosmic annihilation and carved their fear into stone, not for themselves, not for their children, but for us. And the deeper we dig, the more we uncover a terrifying possibility. The cycle may be due to repeat. In the next chapter, we confront the most controversial question of all. If Göbekli Tepe warns us of a repeating cosmic cycle, are we living at the edge of the next one?
For thousands of years, Göbekli Tepe lay buried beneath a hill of its own making, hidden by the very people who built it. No other ancient site was deliberately entombed on such a massive scale. Not destroyed, not abandoned, buried, as if its builders feared what might happen if future generations discovered what they had carved into stone. But why? Why hide a site that contains humanity's earliest, most advanced astronomical knowledge? Why bury the warnings they worked so hard to preserve? Some believe the answer is simple, because the danger wasn't over. And perhaps it still isn't. Let us return to the cycle hinted at in the Vulture Stone, the Younger Dryas comet impact, the torrid meteor stream, and the ancient fear of returning destruction. After years of research, astronomers now confirmed something Göbekli Tepe's builders seemed to know instinctively. Earth encounters the densest region of the torrid complex roughly every few thousand years. During these encounters, the probability of impacts increases dramatically. But here's the part that chills researchers to the bone. We are entering that cluster again, right now. Modern astronomers have identified massive objects so large they could flatten an entire region that move within this meteor stream. They are dark, hard to detect, and traveling close to Earth's orbital path. Many remain uncharted. Göbekli Tepe's builders wouldn't have known orbital mechanics, but they didn't need to. They watched the sky with a level of devotion modern people can hardly imagine. Night after night, decade after decade, they tracked movements, patterns, cycles. They observed, they recorded, they warned. They carved the memory of destruction into stone so it would survive long after they were gone. And now, standing at the edge of a new cosmic cycle, we must ask ourselves, did they bury Göbekli Tepe because they believed the next catastrophe was coming, or because they feared the knowledge inside it would be misunderstood or misused? But there is another layer to this mystery, because Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Across the world, ancient structures seem to echo the same fear. Megalithic sites separated by oceans, sites that should have no connection whatsoever, display alignments pointing to catastrophic celestial cycles. Some align with the Pleiades, others track the precession of the equinoxes. Many encode events around 10,500 BCE, the same era as the Younger Dryas impacts. Consider this. The pyramids of Giza align with Orion's belt circa 10,500 BCE. The Sphinx faces Leo precisely for the same year. The megaliths of Malta track the rising of catastrophic star clusters. The ancient Andean cultures spoke of a sky serpent returning in cycles. Aboriginal Australian legends describe a fire from the heavens falling long before known history. These are not isolated stories. They are global memories. Memories of a time when humanity watched the sky not with curiosity, but with terror. Göbekli Tepe, it seems, was merely the first to carve that terror into stone. And the carvings do more than track past events. Some appear predictive. Take Enclosure D, one of the oldest and most elaborately carved structures on the site. Its pillars contain animal symbols that match constellations, but with slight shifts, as if marking future positions. Stars depicted not where they were, but where they will be. This suggests the builders understood precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, which shifts the stars over a 26,000-year cycle. This knowledge was supposedly first discovered by the Greeks around 150 BCE, but Göbekli Tepe is from 10,000 BCE. How did a group of hunter-gatherers, supposedly lacking agriculture, writing, or mathematics, predict star positions thousands of years into the future? Unless they had records from an earlier time, or teachers, or knowledge handed down from a civilization long forgotten, one erased by the very catastrophe the site records. Göbekli Tepe may not be the birthplace of knowledge. It may be the tombstone of an older world, a world destroyed before history began,
a world erased so thoroughly that only memories, myths, and stone carvings remain. And now consider the strangest detail of all. The site was intentionally buried around 8,200 BCE, immediately after yet another global cooling event caused by a massive meltwater pulse that disrupted climate patterns across the world. Archaeologists note that this burial required an enormous, coordinated effort, tens of thousands of tons of soil moved by hand. But why would a society invest such extreme effort into hiding its greatest monument? Unless something happened, something terrifying enough to force them to seal the site forever. Some propose a cultural shift, others suggest ritual change. But the more you study the evidence, the more one explanation rises above the rest. They buried it to protect something, or to prevent something, or because they believed a cosmic cycle had ended and a new, dangerous one was beginning. Perhaps they thought that if the knowledge encoded there fell into unworthy hands, it would be misused. Or perhaps they feared that reading the warnings would invite the very catastrophe they sought to avoid. Ancient cultures often believed knowledge itself could be dangerous. But here's the modern, scientific twist. Shortly after Göbekli Tepe was buried, humanity entered a period of rapid transformation. Agriculture, cities, writing, metallurgy. Civilization began its ascent. Did the burial mark the end of an old cosmic age and the beginning of a new one? And if so, what happens when that age ends? Because according to the cycles carved in stone, according to the star maps encoded in pillars, according to the global myths of destruction, our age is not permanent. It is temporary. A chapter, a breath. In the next part, we confront the final, most forbidden question. If Göbekli Tepe was constructed as a warning, then who were its builders warning us about? What force, celestial or otherwise, did they believe would return?
Every mystery at Göbekli Tepe, the alignments, the buried enclosures, the encoded warnings, points to one final question that scholars refuse to ask publicly. Who taught the builders? Because whether we accept it or not, the evidence is unavoidable. A group of hunter-gatherers with no agriculture, no writing, no metallurgy, and no architectural tradition did not simply invent megalithic engineering, astronomical calculation, sacred geometry, and cosmic recording overnight. Civilization is not born fully grown. It grows, piece by piece. Yet Göbekli Tepe appears suddenly, like a spark igniting in darkness. No precursor sites, no earlier experiments, no gradual development, just perfection. As if someone handed them the blueprint. But who? Some say it was an advanced human culture erased by the Younger Dryas cataclysm, a civilization older than history, remembered only as myth. Atlantis, Lemuria, Dilmun, call it whatever name you like, the stories are global. Others believe it was visitors, not from Earth. But there is a third possibility, one far stranger and far more unsettling. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not the first humans. They were the survivors of a previous cycle, a cycle that ended in fire. Let us explore this idea. The lost age before the flood. Ancient texts from nearly every culture speak of a time before the flood, a golden age when gods walked the earth and knowledge flowed freely. But these gods may not have been divine beings, merely humans from a civilization more advanced than we imagine. The Sumerians called them the antediluvian kings, rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the Great Flood wiped the world clean. The Egyptians spoke of the Zep Tepi, the first time,
when the gods brought sacred knowledge to earth. Greek myths describe ages of humanity, each ending in destruction and rebirth. Hindu cosmology tells of cycles of creation and annihilation stretching across eons. All these stories share one theme. An age of knowledge ends. A cataclysm follows. The survivors rebuild. If Göbekli Tepe was built by the survivors, not the originators, then its pillars are not inventions. They are memories. In stone, they recorded what their ancestors already knew: astronomy, geometry, symbols, cycles of destruction. Göbekli Tepe may not be a beginning. It may be an echo. The anomaly of human intelligence. Consider this. Between 200,000 and 50,000 years ago, human cognition accelerated at a speed that defies evolutionary explanation. Within a seemingly impossible window, humans gained symbolic thinking, language, complex tool-making, ritual behavior, abstract reasoning, and art. Traits that normally take millions of years to develop appeared in mere thousands. Scientists cannot explain this leap, but ancient stories can. Many mythologies describe a moment where knowledge was given to humanity, not developed, a transfer, a gift, or in some stories, a corruption. Could Göbekli Tepe be a relic of that transfer? A monument built by a people who carried inherited knowledge, knowledge from a vanished age. If so, their work was not the beginning of civilization. It was the salvage operation after everything had been lost. The hidden foundation. There is one more detail that rarely makes it into mainstream reports. Underneath Göbekli Tepe is another layer, older, stranger, possibly far more advanced. Ground-penetrating radar surveys reveal structures below the main enclosures archaeologists haven't yet excavated. Officially, this is due to preservation concerns. Unofficially, some suggest the findings are inconvenient. Because if deeper layers prove older and more advanced, it rewrites everything. It suggests the people who built the visible site inherited an even greater structure, a blueprint, a prototype, a relic from the world before the flood. And that would mean Göbekli Tepe is not the first chapter of civilization. It's the second, perhaps the third, or even the fourth. The buried truth. Why bury the site? Why hide the very knowledge their ancestors died to preserve? Some believe the builders feared another catastrophe, one encoded in the stars, but others propose a more chilling explanation. They weren't burying a warning, they were burying a memory too painful to carry, a memory of the world destroyed, a memory of the ones who came before and the power they possessed. Or perhaps they buried the site because the knowledge it contained did not belong to humanity anymore, because it was forbidden. Ancient cultures are filled with stories of knowledge humans were not meant to have. Fire stolen from the gods, secrets taken from heaven, wisdom forbidden to mortals. What if Göbekli Tepe represents humanity's first rebellion, or humanity's first punishment? The return of the teachers. Myths everywhere speak of beings who taught early humans. The Apkallu of Mesopotamia, the Watchers of the Book of Enoch, the Viracochas of the Andes, the Shining Ones of Egypt, the Anunnaki descending from the sky. Different names, same descriptions. Tall, radiant, wise, otherworldly. Were these literal beings, symbolic metaphors, or memories of a forgotten race from a lost epoch? If these teachers existed, they would not have simply vanished. Either they were destroyed in the catastrophe, or they left. But many ancient texts promise something eerie. They will return, not as conquerors, not as gods, but as witnesses of the next cycle. If the toroid meteor stream is indeed part of a repeating cosmic clock, if ancient civilizations saw destruction coming, if they carved warnings into stone, then perhaps the ones who came before expected humanity to rise again, rebuild again, and eventually rediscover their message. And when we do, that may be the signal they have been waiting for. The final question. Göbekli Tepe asks the most forbidden question of all. What if human history does not begin with us? What if we are merely the survivors, the inheritors, the children of an earlier world? A world erased, a world forgotten, a world whose last message was carved into pillars pointing at the stars. For 12,000 years those stones whispered, "Something came before you, something powerful, something ancient, something that watched the skies and feared what they saw." Now the pillars speak again. Their burial mound has been cleared, their warnings exposed, their patterns decoded. But the message is incomplete, because one piece is still missing. Who built the original map? Where did they go? And what were they trying to warn us about? Until we answer those questions, Göbekli Tepe will remain what it has always been, a doorway to a world we no longer remember, a beacon from an age we did not survive, a reminder that civilization is fragile and that the sky above us holds secrets older than humanity itself. And perhaps, just perhaps, Göbekli Tepe is not an ancient temple, not a calendar, not a shrine, but a message from the ones who came before. A message humanity is only now able to hear.